Welcome, everyone, to our latest iteration of Crafty History. This time we will be talking about macrame. My name's Shoshana Frank, an adult services librarian at the Naperville Public Library. I'm so glad you could join me. Today we'll be learning about macrame, a form of textile produced using knotting techniques. We really only use two different knots in macrame, a square or reef knot and a half hitch knot. The reef knot is at least 4,000 years old, and the name dates back from at least 1794, originating from its common use to reef sails, that is, to tie part of the sail down to decrease its effective surface area in strong winds. To release the knot, a sailor could collapse it with a pull of one hand. The sail's weight would make the collapsed knot come apart. The name square knot is often used for the unslipped version of a reef knot. The half hitch is a simple overhand knot where the working end of a line is brought over and under the standing part. You can see pictured an example of one of the macrame knots we'll be learning today, as well as a beautiful macrame wall hanger. A brief history of macrame. Let's go all the way back in time to the ancient Babylonians and Assyrians, where one of the earliest recorded uses of macrame style knots as decoration appeared in their carvings. Fringe-like plaiting and braiding adorned the costumes of the time and were captured in their stone statuary. Both of these examples pictured on the screen are from the National Museum of Natural History in the Smithsonian. Carrying on a little further into the past, we have Arab weavers that knotted excess thread along the edges of hand-loomed fabrics, such as towels, shawls, and veils, into beautiful decorative fringes. The word macrame is derived from the Arabic word macramia and believed to mean striped towel, ornamental fringe, or embroidered veil. Another school of thought indicates that it actually comes from the Turkish word makramea, napkin or towel. The decorative fringes also helped keep flies off of camels and horses in northern Africa. The Moorish conquest took the craft to Spain, Italy, and especially throughout Europe. And in fact, in England, it was introduced at the court of Mary II in the late 17th century, and Queen Mary taught her ladies-in-waiting how to do macrame. In the Victorian era, macrame was extremely popular, and it adorned most homes in items such as tablecloths, bedspreads, and curtains. Sailors made macrame objects while not busy at sea and sold or bartered them when they landed, thus spreading the art to places like China and the quote-unquote New World. 19th century British and American soldiers made hammocks, bell fringes, and belts from macrame. They often called the process square knotting after the knot they used most. You can see pictured on the screen a photo of Queen Victoria with a macrame handbag. Fast forwarding a little bit further, we get to the 1970s, where macrame's popularity resurged, making wall hangings, clothing accessories, small jean shorts, bedspreads, tablecloths, draperies, plant hangers, and other furnishings. Basically, anything that could be made out of macrame was in the 1970s. By the early 1980s, though, macrame began to fall out of fashion, only to be revived in today's age by our millennial generation. You can see pictured on the screen on the left side a lovely 1970s macrame necklace, and on the right a contemporary macrame flower bouquet. Now that we've learned a little bit about the history of macrame, let's get started on our craft today, which is making a hanging plant holder. In your craft kit are 8 macrame strings, 1 wooden circle, and 1 short colorful macrame string. From home, you'll also need scissors and the pot that will be going in your hanging planter. We're using a bucket here at the library. Once you have all of your supplies together, we will begin by taking all of our string and uncoiling it. So after we uncoil our string, we want the two ends to be roughly similar in length. So we'll gather up our ends, kind of group them together. You can see I have some that are a little bit shorter than others and some that are longer. That's all okay. I'll just kind of gather it up and then fold it in half, which we will put through our ring. So I've taken our macrame, folded it in half, and placed it through the middle of this ring. So on one side you have everything looped over through the ring, and on the other side you have a long tail of macrame. Now that we have our macrame tail in half and through the wooden ring, we are going to make a coil here at the top holding our planter in place. To do that, we'll use our colorful string. After we've gathered all of our macrame up here, we'll do a short tail up at the top, and then we will create a little loop at the bottom, and we will keep all of this gathered up. Then we're going to take our long tail, you can see our long tail, and we are going to coil it around our macrame. And we want to coil this tightly because this is holding our planter in place. And we can do as many coils as we would like. When I get to just a little bit left, I'm going to take the end that I have been coiling and put it through the loop down here and hold that tight with my finger. Then I'm going to take my top end here by the wooden ring and pull it so that the loop closes. As I continue to pull it, I am going to have that little loop tugged up under the coil to hide it so that it is no longer visible. Then we are going to trim off our tails because we don't need them anymore. So we have our loop and coil, and this will be the front side of our macrame, and you can see it looks gorgeous. For the next part, you will want to put your wooden ring onto a hook in your house or some sort of object that will hold it steady for you. I am using one of our handy dandy carts here at the library. Now we are going to separate our macrame string into 4 groups of 4. As you can see, I have 4 groups of 4 for our macrame string. We're going to just start with one group of 4, so we'll put the other 3 off to the side. So we have our 3 groups of 4 off to one side and our group of 4 towards us to work on it. So we're going to begin with square knots, which, if you remember from the history, is one of the most basic knots that you will use for macrame. In order to do that, you'll separate 2 macrame strings in the middle and then 2 macrame strings on either side. Then you will make a number 4 shape with one side of your string, and then on the other side you will also make a number 4 shape, but that string will go over, under, and be looped in like so. So you can see the macrame strings are threaded through each other in order to make a square knot. And then we will, keeping the middle 2 tight, snug that up to the top. To keep it being square, you want to alternate which one is your front strand. So on the first one, I did the right as the front strand. So now I'm going to do the left side as the front strand. You can see I have it again with that same shape, and I'll snug it up. You can see it makes kind of a square look. So now I'll do the alternating side, which is the right side first. And pull that tight. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see I'm going to make a 4 and then put this on a string like that. Like so, and snug it up tight. Now I'm going to do 18 of these square knots. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I actually did 20 square knots, and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot there. The tighter that you pull your macrame, the smaller your knots will be. So I'm actually going to do a couple more. I've done 24 square knots, and the great thing about macrame is you can decide to do more knots, fewer knots. It's totally up to you and your design aesthetic and what you will be most happy with. So now that we've done our square knots, we're going to do twist knots. And in order to do that, it's similar to the square knot, but instead of alternating sides of which string is on top, we're going to keep it the same side of the string on top. So I'm going to start with my right string on top, and I will carry that through for the next 18 macrame knots. So I will always have the right knot on top, and as I begin to add, you will see it starts to twist. So you can see how it's starting to twist since I'm doing a twist knot. I'm going to carry on doing those. And it's fine if your string twists all the way around your project. You just want to make sure you always choose the same side. So I started with the right, and I want to keep having the right on top. All right, so I now have 20 twist knots. So I have 24 square knots, 20 twist knots, and I can see kind of how my one arm of my planter is going to look. I think I'm going to do a couple more square knots because I want the square knot to be a little further down on my work. Okay. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for the other 3 sides. So I did 24 square knots, 20 twist knots, and 6 square knots more at the bottom. So let's meet back up once you have that all done. Now that you have all 4 arms of your hanging planter basket done with your macrame patterns, you want to grab your pot. Because we are going to measure approximately how big you want to make your basket for your pot. So you can kind of put your pot in there and estimate kind of where you want the arms to be and how long you want it to be. So I'm thinking that I want my planter to be kind of like this. This looks like a good height. So if I am holding my arms, kind of see like, okay, I want my first knot to be about here, and that's about 5-6 inches down. And then again, estimating approximately how far down I am going to take half of my knots, so one of the inside and one of the outside, and an inside and an outside. I'm going to do a square knot. So I'll have new insides here, then I'm going to do the right and the left side. Kind of, yep, that's where I want it. So then I'll do the left side first and then the right side. I'm just going to snug these up right against each other and pull it tight. So then I'm going to do that same thing all the way around. So I'm grabbing my next arm and I'm taking the two middle, kind of estimating about 5 to 6 inches. So now I have these knots. It's starting to make my basket. So I'm going to grab my pot again. So I have our first section, and now I want to do a second to kind of hold it in place much closer. So I'm going to do it right about there. And it's the same concept. You're just grabbing, so you have your two knots there, and you're grabbing the opposite sides and doing that exact same thing. And this time I'm going to do it much closer, so only about 3 inches down from that knot earlier. So now I have 2 sections of square knot making my little basket, and we are almost done. So we're going to grab our pot once again, and for our last piece, so you can see this is holding our pot really nicely in this little net. And we are going to do a coil just like we did at the beginning. But instead of using extra rope on the side, we have this giant tail, and whatever longest piece you have, you can cut some extra. So the longest piece you have, you're going to cut an extra because you're not going to want this much of a tail. So I now have a piece. I have an idea of where I want my bucket to be, or my pot to be. So I'll take that out. We have everything gathered, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did at the beginning with our coil and loop. So we have our tail that is pointing up. We have it all gathered at our point where we want the bottom of our pot to sit. We're going to pinch that, make a little loop with our freshly cut section of our macrame string. And then we are going to hold this all tightly and coil it around. This might be a little bit harder than it was at the top, but I am confident you can all persevere. So then we have our little loop. We're going to put our tail through the loop and hold that there, and then have our tail that we started with to pull the loop up into our coil so it'll be nice and snug, and then we can trim our excess tails. So now you have almost finished your macrame planter. We have our nice little coil. The last thing you're going to want to do is cut your end with however much tail you want your macrame to have. Since it's all different lengths, you really can have a nice long tail, you can have a shorter tail, you can unravel this and get it fringy. This is the fun part, well, all of it's the fun part, where you can really make your macrame planter anything that your heart desires. And that is how you can make a macrame planter. Now that we've learned how to make our macrame planter, there's so much more that you can do with these two basic knots that I showed you all today. We have a lot of nonfiction titles here at the Naperville Public Library that can be found in the Dewey Decimal System under 746.4222. We also have, for all those mystery fans, craft-themed cozy mysteries where macrame appears quite often. If you're looking to expand your ability to do macrame, check out our Creative Bug database that any Naperville Public Library cardholder can use. There are classes on keychains, planters, feathers, wall hanging, and monkey fist knots, all of which will be a ton of fun to adorn your house with. Thank you all for joining me today. I'm so glad we were able to learn a little bit about macrame and make some lovely planters. See you next time.